InvestorIdeas.com podcasts.
Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of InvestorIdeas.com podcasts. In today's podcast, we're going to be looking at a few public company announcements from AVCN Incorporated, trading on the TSX as AVCN and the OTCQX as AVCNF. HEXO Corporation, trading on the TSX as HEXO and the New York Stock Exchange as HEXO. Cannabis Global Incorporated, trading on the TSX as ZENA, as well as EHVVF Incorporated, trading on the OTC as EHVVF. So first starting with AVCN, a biopharmaceutical company focusing on the development of manufacturing and commercialization of plant-derived cannabinoid-based products, announced that the company's research collaborators have received 2 independent peer-reviewed grants from the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada. Now, the NSERC Alliance grants will be used to expand the investigators' collaborative research with AVCN. So for the past 3 years, Dr. Christine Allen's research group, or CARG, in the Leslie Dan Faculty of Pharmacy at the University of Toronto, has supported the development and optimization of AVCN's cannabinoid-based products, including commercial cosmetics and medical cannabis product lines, and the pharmaceutical pipeline that is currently under clinical investigation. Now, Dr. Allen will now leverage a recent MIT ACS award in addition to the NSERC Alliance grant in collaboration with AVCN to develop a cannabinoid-based formulation for the treatment of COVID-19 related lung inflammation. Now, a second NSERC Alliance grant was awarded to Dr. Jibrin Kohar, the assistant professor at the University of Guelph, who has an extensive track record in behavioral pharmacology and neuroscience. AVCN's research program with Dr. Kohar focuses on evaluating a variety of cannabinoids in several preclinical modes of human psychiatric conditions, including mental health disorders such as anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Now, the NSERC grant was awarded to evaluate the neurobiological underpinnings of cannabis toxicosis in a preclinical model and test the potential efficacy of AVCN's naturally derived cannabinoids and formulations in the treatment of cannabis-induced toxicosis. With the recent changes in the Canadian regulations for Cannabis 2.0 allowing for cannabinoid edibles and vapes, there is concern around an increased risk for adverse events arising from accidental high-dose cannabis ingestion. And thus, this 2-year project will determine the behavioral and neural correlations of cannabis-induced toxicosis and the effects of cannabinoids for counteracting cannabis-induced toxicosis. Dr. Jibrin Kahar commented that this research is extremely timely with the new Cannabis 2.0 regulations and the increased risk for cannabis-induced toxicosis. I'm thankful to the NSERC and AVCN for support for this important research that will have an impact in our understanding of the neurobiological underpinnings of and provide novel treatment avenues to treat adverse events related to high-dose cannabis exposures. So obviously 2 different grants there. The first one focusing on COVID-19 related ailments with the lung inflammation. And we've seen a lot of movement within the cannabis space surrounding treatment of COVID-19 symptoms. And so far, early research and early tests have shown at least some success when it comes to inflammation, as well as overall assistance with health. You've seen lots of CBD products that are coming out into the market, and again, a few cannabinoid-based products that are heavy in THC that are starting to come out as well. Again, I don't anticipate you're going to see any of these products available until probably sometime next year, but it is, again, a good sort of place for the cannabis industry to end up if they can heal or aid in any way with COVID-19 related symptoms. That's going to be a huge benefit for the industry as a whole. The other grant there focusing on cannabis toxicosis obviously is somewhat of an important element within the cannabis space, especially when it comes to the neurological side. I would hope that they would have a little bit of a better understanding of maybe what's causing some of the adverse effects with cannabis toxicosis. Although in general, I think a lot of the data is going to show that it's pretty rare for cannabis toxicosis to occur. It's also pretty rare for anyone to really have that adverse of effects from cannabis products, simply from cannabis products. There are obviously very big differences when you're mixing cannabis with other medications, especially with alcohol or other pharmaceutical products. But in general, when you're just ingesting or vaping or eating cannabis products, there's not a huge avenue for really intense adverse effects. And again, compared to almost every other drug that's out there, including cough medicine and aspirin, cannabis is a much safer drug as far as there's no real overdose option for you. And I do find it a little bit annoying that they're focusing on, or at least insinuating that the Cannabis 2.0 products are going to lead to cannabis toxicosis, as almost all of the recreational products that are out there have a milligram dose limit on them, so 10 milligrams for edibles, as well as for your vape products. So there really isn't anything accessible within the legal market that could lead to any cannabis toxicosis. So the only way that people are going to get into these states is really going to be from illicit products, which obviously are trying to be removed anyways. Um, but hopefully, once this data does come out, it will give people at least the sense of mind or peace of mind that there isn't really an avenue for them to have severe toxicosis from any cannabis products. It takes a really high amount. I'm going to assume is that most of the information they're going to get out there shows that it takes quite a large dose for toxicosis to really occur. And from what I've seen so far within the medical community, the only real adverse effects they've seen is in the form of some sort of allergies, really. Most of the time, you haven't seen any actual real hard medical data that supports anyone having a real problematic effect with cannabis, unless it becomes, again, overused to the point of creating an allergy, which is the same as bread or apples. So again, I would hope that some of that data helps support this industry as opposed to continuing to propagate sort of the fear of toxicosis from cannabis, but you never know what those results will show. At least from the neurobiological side, I would think that there's going to be some good data that comes out. Next, looking at two companies who are both releasing vape lines, so HEXO Corp and Cannabis Global. HEXO announced the launch of its line of vape products for both adult use and medical consumers across Canada. At HEXO, we pride ourselves in ensuring our consumers have access to high quality, reliable, and consistent cannabis products, said Sebastian St. Louis, CEO and co-founder of HEXO Corp. And we're thrilled to launch our vape products across Canada as we continue to focus on innovation and launching additional 2.0 products across all of our brands. Now, prior to releasing of its line of vapes, the company conducted testing to evaluate the taste, tolerability, and effects of short-term undesired effects of its proprietary terpene blends. And HEXO's vape products currently include 3 ready-to-use vape pens and 4 510 thread cartridges in popular strain-inspired terpene blends. And HEXO vapes are available all across Canada in both adult use and medical consumer stores. As well as Cannabis Global Incorporated announced initial shipments of its Re-Up 510 thread vaporizer line. Now, this week, Cannabis completed first shipments of its new product line, which is produced at Cannabis Altaville, using product cultivated and extracted by Cannabis with no requirements from third-party processing. And Cannabis anticipates that its 510 thread vaporizer line will contribute meaningfully to net revenue from August 2020 onward, given the consumer preference for the Re-Up 510 threaded vaporizer line of products. And thus far, all offers made under the Re-Up 510 threaded vaporizer line have been accepted by provincial companies. And the Cannabis has focused on achieving differentiation in this product line through a focus of competitive best-in-class pricing and products based on terpene flavor profile as opposed to cultivar. Now, Kevin Koff, the Chief Executive Officer of Cannabis, stated, "We're very excited to have completed initial shipments under this product line, especially given that it was achieved through full internalized production of these products at Cannabis Altaville, utilizing in-house extraction and filling. And we believe that the Re-Up 510 thread vaporizer line is a strong complement to our existing premium Pax Era line of vaporizer cartridges." And Olen Vandersteen, Senior Vice President of Cannabis, added, "Based on indications from provincial counterparts and considering our competitive pricing, Cannabis anticipates incrementally monthly revenue in excess of $1 million per month once production at Cannabis Altaville rises to a level to meet consumer demand." So both companies launching their vaporizer lines. HEXO Corp just launching their disposable as well as 510 thread lines across all of Canada, including medical markets, and Cannabis just getting into some of the provinces with their new Re-Up 510. So focusing on HEXO first, great for them to be launching these products in Canada so far. But again, you haven't seen this. The vape industry within Canada right now has a lot of difficulties when it comes to really separating your products from other brands within the industry. One thing that Cannabis did that's actually quite smart was focusing on having a distribution deal with Pax Era, in that they had specific vape pods that were designed for specifically the Pax Era devices, which are a newer line of device. They're not going to fit the standard 510 threading that all of the other vape cartridges are going to be sitting with. So the exclusivity of that sort of product and that partnership with a vape product line was definitely a smart move, and a few other companies have done that with Pax Era as well. But now you're starting to see that Zenabis also focusing on the other segment of the market, which is the 510 thread vaporizers, is also launching that line. So this way they're cornering or at least covering both sides of that segment. So whether you have a Pax Air device or the standard 510 thread batteries, you're able to use a Zenabis product. Whereas for HEXO, still just focusing on the 510 thread, and then having their disposable vape options, which is definitely something that most of these companies have now started to realize is a very smart avenue to have. Lots of people, unfortunately, the cannabis industry isn't as green as we love to pretend to be. And there's still tons of waste and still tons of chuck away products, including the disposable line of vape pens. But unfortunately, the consumers are showing that they actually prefer the disposable lines of vape pens to some of the 510 thread cartridges. And a lot of your initial sales are reflective of that. So I would hope that over time, people will stick to the non-disposable brands, but it's similar to how pre-rolls dominate sort of the dried flower segment of the market. There's still a lot of people who just prefer to have something that they can quickly pick up, chuck the package away, and have access to their cannabis products right away. And again, I don't see that changing or disappearing anytime soon until the average consumer starts being a little bit more selective with their purchasing, and also more concerned about packaging and about the environment, which, as much as people do complain somewhat, people still keep buying these products, and that doesn't really seem to change their buying patterns so far. So definitely for both of these companies, a smart launch of new products within the Cannabis 2.0 lines. But within the vape industry right now, that's where the biggest competition is, whether you're in Canada or the US. And again, still quite difficult to separate yourselves from some of the others within that sector. Lastly, looking at EHVVF and its subsidiary SciTech, who announced today an upcoming psychedelic industry webinar for investors and interested individuals. Now, SciTech was incubated by ICANN, Israel Cannabis, and developed by the team behind Cannatech, the premier international cannabis summit. Now, leveraging the high relevant experience of ICANN, SciTech is positioned to lead the global psychedelic conversation forward. EHVVF CVO Ben Kaplan said, "Our SciTech conferences have been very popular with investors as a result of their insight on the industry. Psychedelic medicine has garnered a tremendous amount of attention since the U.S. Food and Drug Administration authorized breakthrough therapy designation to both Compass Pathways and USONA Institute's psilocybin therapy for depression in 2018. Mr. Kaplan continued, "The mainstream media started talking about it in the last year after a group of private donors donated $17 million to start the Center of Psychedelic and Consciousness Research at Johns Hopkins Medicine, and we expect our complimentary webinar on July 29th will continue our trend of providing important information on psychedelic medicine to investors." Now, the virtual investor webinar titled Mystical Experience, Religion, and Psychedelics is open to individual investors, institutional investors, advisors, analysts, and the psychedelic community. And the program opens at 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, July 29th. Now, some of the speakers include Ira Selkirk, who is the moderator, director of Rise Wellness Retreat, and co-founder of Sancera Life Sciences, Pastor James Lindberg, an ordained clergy person at the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, Rabbi Zach Clementets, founder and CEO of Shefa, psychedelic therapy grounded in Jewish spirituality, William A. Richards, psychologist, the Center of Psychedelic and Consciousness Research at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. And there are no fees to log in or attend the live presentations, and you can register in the link attached in the article or go to scitech.biz/scitech-mystical-experience-July 29th. And there's also a link to their other organization, Mind Medicine Australia, which you can register for their psychedelic therapy and SciTech community there as well. So again, more psychedelic conferences coming up. This one in particular, I definitely would recommend listening to. Going to be some interesting discussions there. I really hope that you'll have a bit of more of a deep dive into the religion and psychedelic sort of connection there from both Pastor James Lindberg as well as Rabbi Zach Clementets. Both of those speakers, I'd be very interested to hear what their psilocybin experiences have been and how that's affected their sort of involvement within their religious sects. And again, there's always more information coming out within the psychedelic community, but specifically this one would be very interesting to focus on as they're focusing mainly on psilocybin and religion combining together. And again, that is next Wednesday on July 29th. That's all for today's podcast. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. That's all for today's podcast. Podcast is now a certified word trademark on the blockchain through Cognate Incorporated's CM certification. InvestorIdeas.com podcasts are also available on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and TuneIn. If you'd like to be a guest or sponsor of this podcast, please contact InvestorIdeas.com. Investor Ideas reminds all listeners to read our disclaimers and disclosures on the InvestorIdeas.com website, and this podcast is not an endorsement to buy products or services or securities. Investors are reminded that all investments involve risk and possible loss of investment. Investor Ideas does not condone the use of cannabis except where permissible by law. Our site does not possess, distribute, or sell cannabis products.